Psalm 91. He who dwells in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty. I will say of the Lord, He is my refuge and my fortress, my God. In Him I will trust. We received this calling from the Lord, but the Lord has got a purpose for us as a family to live out our love for Him, our love for the Africans, to serve. And here we are. God, take our lives and make with us whatever you find pleasant and good in your purpose. So it was a normal day for us, and then I just went to the office and he was teaching that morning. Actually, that was the routine every day. And for the children, if they didn't have a weekend or didn't interact with their friends, they were doing schoolwork. Both of them have got a deep walk with the Lord, and there's this hunger for the Lord that's very precious. And they are growing in their faith day by day. And it's wonderful to be their mom and experience how they are growing and living their lives for the Lord in a place like Afghanistan. Most wonderful thing that parent can do for his child is to bring him up in the Lord's way so that he knows who his Creator is and that he can have a loving relationship with the Lord and live a life for that purpose. I've asked myself many times in the past, Lord, is this really where you want us? Because of all the difficulties, the challenges, we can lose our lives anytime for the Lord. When I look at that in the spiritual realm, I know that He will not take us to a place like Afghanistan and just dump us there, and He doesn't have a plan and a purpose for that. So I know 100% that we are in the right place, that we are obedient to the calling.
Lord, please help us.
I would tell my children, Jean-Pierre and Ruday, you will face a very difficult day today, and I'm not going to be there to help you, and Daddy is also not going to be there to help you. But Jesus is going to be there to help you through this, and He will be there. He promised never to leave us, nor forsake us.
Come on, we gotta get out. Come on, we have to get out of here, Jamie. Come on. Come on, we gotta get out now.
I believe they are in front of the Lord's throne, worshiping Him, praising Him, glorifying Him, and that they are just waiting for me to finish the race as well.
This is always the most difficult sermon to preach. And so I'll ask you to say a prayer for me as we start this morning. This video was a little hard to understand, the accent that the lady had coming from South Africa. But their name is Gruenwald. That happens to be Ginger's maiden name. So we feel a special connection to this family. And knowing that, maybe you'll forgive me if my next comment seems a little unpatriotic. I know that Election Day is coming this week on Tuesday. But while we have been preoccupied by our petty political preferences, Christians in other parts of the world are being persecuted. At least 100 million Christians, some say the number may be closer to 200 million Christians, who are suffering some form of persecution today. That's approximately the same number of American Christians who are attending church services today. The persecuted church can be found in more than 110 countries. Wherever Christians are facing persecution in one form or another. The 10 countries where persecution is the most severe and where Christians are facing the most opposition are North Korea, Iraq, Eritrea, Afghanistan, Syria, Pakistan, Somalia, Sudan, Iran, and Libya, in that order. We can't see the persecuted church. We can't put our arms around them. The best that we can do is to remember them and to pray for them. And that's what we hope you'll do, not only today, but each day this week, if you'll take that insert home with you and use it. We observed the International Day of Prayer for the Persecuted Church last year. That was our first that we were able to share together with you. But this is something that we have been doing for many years. Shortly after our observance last year, Beirut was bombed and Paris was attacked by Muslim extremists. At the same time, about the same time, terrorists in Africa asked people to recite verses from the Quran. If they couldn't, they were shot. Late last year, an Egyptian mother was brutally murdered by her Muslim family after she met and married a Christian man and converted to Christianity. We've been observing this day of prayer for the persecuted church for a long time, 20 years or more, because it occurred to me years ago that most of us in the U.S. have no idea what other Christians are suffering for their faith. And while this may be new to some of you, I assure you that this is nothing new for the followers of Jesus. When the Apostle Paul was in prison, he wrote, "Remember my chains." To the church at Corinth, Paul said, "We are hard pressed on every side, but not crushed, perplexed, but not in despair, persecuted, but not abandoned, struck down, but not destroyed." He said, "We always carry around in our body the death of Jesus, so that the life of Jesus may also be revealed in our body. For we who are alive are always being given over to death for Jesus' sake, so that His life may also be revealed in our mortal body. We don't talk a lot about persecution in this country. In fact, if I were to ask you this morning to share with me the most recent story of a Christian person who has suffered persecution, my guess is there would be little, if any, response. Most of us probably could not remember a case in recent days. We just don't talk about the fact that Christians are the most persecuted religious group in the world. In 2015, it was reported that Christian persecution had reached an unprecedented high, with 11 Christians on average giving their lives for Christ each and every hour. Just imagine. In the time that we are gathered together today, 11 of our brothers and sisters are suffering to the point of death. We know there's been a crisis in Syria over the past several years, and it's become a part of our political rhetoric. But did you know that since the fighting started there in 2011, that the population of Christians has dropped by more than half? From 1.2 million Christians to less than 500,000 today. And of the more than 10,000 refugees that have fled from Syrian violence to the United States, I'm told that most are Muslim. I saw a report just this week that said that of the 10,000 or more refugees who have come here so far from Syria, only 57 are Christian. It's not 57%. It's 57 out of 10,000. And only God knows how many of our Syrian brothers and sisters have died or have yet to die in that troubled part of the world. Kayla Mueller was an American young lady, a Christian young lady who gave her life in Syria. She was there to help the refugees when she was captured by ISIS militants who isolated her and threatened her and raped her and tortured her. In a letter to her parents that was smuggled out of Syria, Kayla said, "I remember Mom always telling me that all in all, in the end, the only one you really have is God." She said, "I've come to a place in experience where, in every sense of the word, I've surrendered myself to our Creator because literally there was no one else. By God and your prayers, I have felt tenderly cradled in free fall. I've been shown in darkness light and have learned that even in prison, one can be free." Her courage in suffering was only reported 2 months ago. She died while she was being held captive in Syria. This past spring in Brussels, Belgium, 2 young people with ties to Tennessee were caught in the terrorist bomb blast that claimed a number of lives. The bombers were Islamic. These 2 victims from right here at home were Christians. Some of you will remember the young man was from Gatlinburg. They were graduates of Vanderbilt. Their funeral service was held at the Southland Christian Church in Lexington. In the South American country of Colombia, ministers were threatened as recently as July by the National Liberation Army. They were forced to pay protection money or face being shut down. Christians in Colombia are restricted on a regular basis from meeting in homes for Bible study, praying together, and other activities. On July 30th of this year, a 45-year-old Indian pastor was taken from his own home and murdered by a communist gang simply because he was a Christian minister. In Laos, there have been multiple cases of persecution as believers are warned to renounce their faith in Christ or face stiff fines. On September 11, an elder in the Philippine church was brutally beaten by two Muslim men in order to instill fear in the minds of the religious community, the Christian community. Christians are being forced from their homes to allow room for the growing Muslim community. This past year may have been the worst year yet for persecution of Christians. And I've just shared with you some of the more recent cases. But I'm told that during any given month, over 300 Christians will be killed because of their faith. Over 200 church properties will be destroyed, and nearly 800 others will be arrested, raped, or beaten because of their belief in Jesus. This is nothing new, even if it's news to you. Jesus said, "Blessed are those who are persecuted because of me, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. And blessed are you when people insult you, persecute you, and falsely say all kinds of evil against you because of me. Rejoice and be glad," Jesus said, "because great is your reward in heaven, for in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you." In that passage that I read earlier from Paul to the Christians at Corinth, he reminds that as long as we live in these jars of clay, as long as we occupy these mortal bodies, as long as we go on living in this dark world, we will be hard-pressed but not crushed, perplexed but not in despair, persecuted but not abandoned, struck down but not destroyed. What does it mean? Persecuted but not abandoned. It means we're not alone. It means that God is in control. He knows what we're going through. And as the psalmist said, He is our refuge and strength and ever-present help in trouble. Persecution is as much a part of the Christian life as temptation. But we believe that God is still in control. Warren Wiersbe says, when God allows His children to go through the furnace, He keeps His eye on the clock and His hand on the thermostat. That's a comforting thought, especially to those who are going through persecution right now. God knows about that godly mother in India who wonders if her children will ever see their father again. He knows about the faithful North Korean farmer whose activities are closely monitored by hostile authorities. He knows about the Chinese preacher who risks his life to train leaders in underground churches. He knows about the American missionaries who come face to face with angry Muslim mobs whenever they try and share their faith in North Africa. He understands the pain of believers in university classrooms here in our own country who are ridiculed because they believe what God says is true. He stands beside the young teenagers right here at home whose friends ridicule them because of their commitment to Christ. He will not abandon them, and we should not abandon them. That's why this International Day of Prayer is so important. Remember, 11 Christians will die this very hour. 11 of us. Brother Andrew is a Christian minister who used to smuggle Bibles into communist countries. He gives 18 ways that we should be praying for the persecuted church. I want to share them with you quickly because our time is short. And then we'll see another short video and sing our invitation hymn. Number 1, he says, pray for their physical protection and deliverance. Jesus said in Matthew 26, "My Father, if it is possible, may this cup be taken from me, yet not as I will, but as you will." Second, pray that God will give them the right words to say. Paul says in Ephesians 6, "Pray also for me, that whenever I speak, my words may be given me, that I will fearlessly make known the mystery of the gospel, for which I am an ambassador in chains. Pray that I may declare it fearlessly as I should." Number 3, pray that they will see that God's grace is sufficient. Jesus said to Paul in 2 Corinthians chapter 12, "My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness." And Paul says, "Therefore I delight in weaknesses, in insults, in hardships, in persecutions, and in difficulties, for when I'm weak, then I'm strong." Number 4, pray that they will look forward to Christ's appearing. Paul said to Timothy in 2 Timothy chapter 4, "The time for my departure is near. I have fought the good fight. I have finished the race. I have kept the faith. And now there is in store for me a crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, will award to me on that day. And not only to me," Paul said, "but also to all who have longed for His appearing." That includes the persecuted church, doesn't it? Number 5, pray that they will rejoice. Hebrews chapter 10, verse 34 says, "You suffered along with those in prison and joyfully accepted the confiscation of your property, because you knew that you yourselves had better and lasting possessions." Number 6, pray that they will endure. Hebrews chapter 10, verse 36 says, "You need to persevere so that when you've done the will of God, you will receive what He promised." Number 7, pray that they will choose ill treatment over the pleasures of sin. Hebrews chapter 11 says that Moses chose to be mistreated along with the people of God rather than to enjoy the fleeting pleasures of sin. Number 8, pray that they will have the same attitude as Christ. Peter says in 1 Peter 4, "Therefore, since Christ suffered in His body, arm yourselves also with the same attitude." Number 9, pray that they will love Christ more than self. Philippians chapter 1, verse 21 says, "For me to live is Christ, and to die is gain." Paul thought that dying for Jesus was better than living without Him. Number 10, pray that they will love their enemies. Jesus said, "Love your enemies, do good to those who hate you, bless those who curse you, and pray for those who mistreat you." Number 11, pray that they will not be tempted to sin. And in the calm before the storm, that's always a possibility. Matthew chapter 26 says that on the very night that Jesus was betrayed, He warned His disciples, "Pray that you will not fall into temptation." Number 12, pray that they will count it all joy. Acts chapter 5 says the apostles rejoiced that they had been counted worthy of suffering disgrace for the name of Jesus. They rejoiced. Number 13, pray that they will remember to expect persecution. Philippians chapter 1, verse 29 says, "For it's been granted to you on behalf of Christ, not only to believe in Him, but also to suffer for Him." Number 14, pray that they will leave a godly testimony. Philippians 1 says, "Do not be frightened in any way by those who oppose you. This is a sign to them that they will be destroyed, but that you will be saved." Number 15, pray that they'll remember their reward. Paul said in Romans 8, "I consider that our present sufferings are not worth comparing to the glory that will be revealed in us." Number 16, pray that they will trust God completely. 2 Corinthians chapter 1 verse 9 says that we rely not on ourselves, but on God, who raises the dead. He has delivered us from such a deadly peril, Paul said, and He will deliver us again. Number 17, pray that they will bear the marks of Jesus gladly. Galatians chapter 6 verse 17 says, "From now on, let no one cause me trouble, for I bear on my body the marks of Jesus." And number 18, pray that they would be willing to suffer for Christ. Colossians chapter 1 verse 24 in a contemporary version says, "I am happy in my suffering for you. There is much that Christ must still suffer through His body, the church. And many are suffering." Perhaps 100,000, maybe 200,000 are suffering right now. 11 to the point of death in the past hour. So we should pray for them and keep on praying for them until Jesus comes or the persecution ends.
Who gave their lives on the altar of the lost. There's a sowing, there's a reaping, there's a death that comes alive through the power of the cross. Draw back the curtain, tear away the veil. There's a crown of glory waiting for the witness that prevails. When the days have all been counted, when we face the final hour, will you welcome home, my child? It's your time.